welcome on into the Utah Blockcast. I'm Steve Bartle, Utah insider for KSL Sports. Man, it's Friday, and it's a big Friday. Tomorrow is Saturday, and that means first scrimmage of fall camp for Utah football. So, unfortunately, we won't be up there. The media won't be up there. We won't get updates. There's no media availability, nothing like that. But it's a big step, a big checkpoint in fall camp, and it's such a long off season. Now it's here, and man, it feels like it's flying by. So we're to the first scrimmage, and then we've got another scrimmage next Saturday, and then it's in season mode. So time is flying by. It's exciting, and getting a lot of good updates over the from camp and sort of what's going on and all that sort of stuff. Wanted to again say thank you to everybody that tunes into the live stream. I'm still trying to figure out how to get that beyond, sharing to just Twitter. I've got it on auto share through StreamYard and that. So I got to figure out how to get it beyond just Twitter. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. Those live streams have been a lot of fun, and there's just great source of entertainment to say the least. More so from you guys than me, but yeah, it was good. That was a lot of fun, and appreciate everybody for tuning in and contributing as well. So excited to do those this season, and we may move the date around in terms of when we do those. I'm thinking Monday night will probably become the night that we do a live stream. I think that'll be a good night to kind of recap from the previous game, and then also we'll have updates from Kyle Whittingham and practice and that sort of stuff once we get into the season. So that's sort of what I'm thinking in terms of when we'll do the live stream and all that. But that is definitely something I want to keep doing this season, and it's just been a lot of fun. So really appreciate the engagement from everybody, and it's been it's just been a good time. So on today's episode, this will be a short, succinct episode. I've got an interview with Utah freshman defensive tackle Karson Kaufusi. I've been really high on Karson since he committed last summer. I think he's got a really bright future in that defensive tackle room, and so I missed the opportunity to talk to him during spring ball, but wanted to rectify that very early on in camp based on what I've heard, and had the opportunity to talk with him one on one on Thursday. So that's part of this episode, but this is a big one. Brett Ciancia hopped on the Blockcast with me, and it was good to catch up with Brett. He's done a great job with the Pick Six previews. He started doing the magazine back in 2019, and that thing has just taken off. And so, really excited to have Brett on. And we obviously talked through Utah and sort of their projection this year. We talked through the Big 12 and then also sort of the big picture in college football this year. So good to have Brett on. As always, he does a tremendous job with those preview magazines, and he's going to be doing something pretty unique this year. It's first time doing this Pick Six Plus, where it's essentially you subscribe. It's a updates weekly, just keeps data and everything. He talks through it quite a bit, and I think it'll be a really cool feature to add to, to your frequently visited websites this season. So again, really excited to hear from Brett, and I think he shared a lot of encouraging insights with Utah and what he expects of them this season. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Quick summary of some of the storylines this week as we head into the first scrimmage on Saturday. I think everybody's kind of interested in how Devin Dampier and those pass catchers are performing, and I think there's been some encouraging updates that I've gotten over the course of the last 2 weeks, and Coach Whittingham talked about it on Wednesday that you're starting to see some guys emerge. You're starting to see a little bit of separation in terms of the hierarchy. I would say they have it in tiers right now, broken down in tiers, where you've got a guy like Tobias Merriweather and Dadrian Zipperer as two guys in that top tier, and then JJ Buchanan has been has had a lot of buzz around his name to start camp, and so I think those were players that Coach Whittingham mentioned on Wednesday, singled out as players that are playing really good football, and so That's matched what I've heard so far through fall camp. And there's been other good things going on. Again, you've got those three. Dallin Bentley has had a good camp, and Ryan Davis has been pretty productive, as has Creed Whittemore, and Larry Simmons has flashed as well. So, but I think everybody going into the scrimmage on Saturday, I think everybody's interested to see how that group performs. Kyle Whittingham talked about it. That's going to be kind of where they start to really gain clarity and who they can count on, who they can trust, and that's going to be key. So I think top storyline going into the scrimmage is Dampier in the passing game with that wide receiver room specifically. And then obviously the cornerback room on the other side of the ball and that spot opposite of Scooby. Uh, that's still primarily Blake Cotton and Donovan Saunders. But you've got Jeremiah Caldwell, who's made progress with his game since spring ball, and then J.C. Hart has come in, and he was a transfer from Auburn. He'll be going into his third year of college football. He's a redshirt sophomore, and he's made a good first impression. They've got Jalen Moson, who's also working his way into a groove. They're trying to make that fit and make that work at nickel, and I think that's a good spot for him. But in terms of that spot on the outside opposite of Scoob, I think you're looking at Blake Cotton versus Donovan Saunders still, with Caldwell and Hart playing good football as well. So, and then too, Jackson Benny has been another bright spot in fall camp. He's been a guy that's just continued to make plays, and there's a lot of optimism around him and sort of his potential this season. He is a guy that I think Utah coaches are going to feature on the field quite a bit this year, and his presence on the field gives Utah quite a bit of flexibility with the potential to move Smith outside when Benny is on the field. I think that's a really unique secondary with Benny in it, just because you'll have three safeties on the field essentially, all three of which are really good athletes, and you can do some pretty fun things in terms of coverage and that sort of stuff. So really interested to see how that group shakes out, the cornerback spot specifically, but that's going to be something that we will be paying close attention to. Obviously, the backup quarterback spot with Isaac Wilson and Bird Ficklin. It sounds like Bird Ficklin is coming off one of his best practices, but Wilson has been the guy that's controlled the bulk of those opportunities and snaps. But I think tomorrow could be a pretty significant moment in that backup quarterback job battle. So those are the three big position battles I think everybody's paying attention to. Obviously, you want to hear progress from the defensive tackle room and that young defensive tackle group. You want to hear the running game and sort of how that pecking order is shaking out at running back. But those are probably the top three storylines going into the scrimmage on Saturday, and I think what everybody's looking to gain clarity on. So that'll be stuff that I'll be paying attention to and keeping my eyes and ears peeled in terms of updates and all that sort of stuff. So we'll look forward to that. Well, before we get to the interviews, I want to make sure I give a little hat tip to Gavin Peterson and Utah women's basketball. His coaching staff have done a tremendous job so far on the recruiting trail. With they got it going last week with a significant commitment in Riley Little, who is a 6'4" big. Pretty ironic there, but she's a talented big. Obviously, at her size, she moves well. She's automatic inside, good post game. You add a 6'4" big to this roster, and a freshman at that, somebody you can build with, in the future, and that's pretty significant. Then earlier this week, 4-star guard out of Bountiful, Malika Satuala, who comes from the same Satuala family that is well known at Utah and BYU. Malika committed to Utah as well, and she's a hooper. And if she were 3-4 inches taller, she'd probably be playing volleyball. Like she's a great athlete. She can get up. She can get off the floor vertically, and that's a significant addition to the class as well. And then keep in mind, Utah also will welcome 5-star guard Brooklyn Haywood to campus for an official visit next month. pretty much a month from today. She'll be here September 7th. And so Gavin Peterson and his staff, his program, doing some work on the recruiting trail. So need to pay respects to them. Make sure I mention them and show them some love. With Alex Jensen and his staff, they're closing in on some official visits. I think Abdu Torre, the 5-star guard from back east, is somebody that has uh, Utah has gained a lot of ground with, thanks to the relationships that Coach Chilius has back east, and so I think he's become the focal point of their recruiting efforts. He's a 6'6" guard, wing, a really athletic, good skill set. I think he's somebody that Utah fans should be paying attention to in terms of his recruitment, potentially visiting and all that sort of stuff. So with all that out of the way, let's get to my interview first with Utah freshman defensive tackle Karson Kaufusi.
Now into fall camp.
Yes, sir.
Year, true freshman year. How's it been?
It's been great. It's awesome coming out here every day. It's been a blessing. It's been fun. Get work in and stuff. Yeah, it's been great.
So you've now obviously coming out of spring camp and now getting into fall camp. Things are ramping up, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. How do you feel you've adjusted and acclimated to the level of competition?
Good. I think being here in the spring was a big help for me, just learning the playbook and then learning the speed of the game. I think that's the biggest transition from high school is the speed. But being here in the spring was definitely a big thing for me in my transition. And then, so I think it's been good. It's been pretty – it's not been too hard is what I'm trying to say.
Awesome.
But, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And, another big thing for freshmen coming in is obviously the physicality and weight and body and all that sort of stuff. What has that process been like for you over the last couple of months?
It's been good, So I came in, I had to put a couple pounds on. I put a couple pounds on before the spring. And then throughout the summer, Coach E and his staff have done a great job. I've been in the weight room. Then I was able to put some good weight on after the spring as well, going into summer.
How do you feel like that's benefited you being out here?
A lot. It's benefited me a lot for sure. Just having extra weight is just helpful.
How much has Luther Ellis helped in your development in terms of the technique and understanding the nuances of the spot?
A ton. I mean, it's the biggest focus every day is just our technique, fundamentals. We do it every day over and over again until we get it right. So he's great. He works, and it's something we focus on in film is fundamentals before we look at the offense is our fundamentals. So, yeah, he's been great in helping me and developing me and stuff.
So, obviously, with you being here at spring, you kind of got a head start. There have been a handful of other guys now, freshmen that have come into the room. Have you been able to take on a little bit of a leadership role with them in terms of kind of showing them the ropes and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I think both me and Cione have been able to help those guys that have come in and just we definitely still look up to our leaders, Jonah, Dallas, Aliki, and them. But, yeah, with, playbook fundamentals and stuff, it's been good to be able to teach those guys as well.
What are your thoughts on those three new guys, Dylan Battle, Semi, and...
They're great. They're great. They're all competitors. Everybody wants to win. And, I'm excited. Our room is great. It's going to be a fun year.
Awesome. So, last one here, just as we get through fall camp and start to look forward to the season, just what's your mindset in terms of what you want to do and contribute and that sort of stuff?
I'm for the team, so whatever the team needs, I want to be there. But then obviously, I think everybody has the goal of being on the field. So I want to be on the field, but I'm also here just to contribute and for the culture. So
awesome, Karson. Appreciate the time, man.
Of course.
So there you have it, interview with Karson Kaufusi. And like I said, I've been high on him for a while now, and he's got tremendous size. He didn't mention it, but he's tipped the scales around 305, so he's put on a lot of good weight. A few other defensive tackles and defensive ends have put on a good amount of weight as well. So I know a lot of people are focused on some of those weight numbers on the official roster, and I'll just say that I think a handful of guys are certainly tipping the scales at a higher number than what they're listed at on the roster. So, but yeah, Karson up to 305, and I think he's going to be, in the rotation, have a decent sized role in the rotation at defensive tackle. I think he's set up to play a good contributing role this year with him coming in and with Karson. At his size, he's 6'6", 305. He just moves so well. He's got a lot of natural flexibility, power. He's got that kind of explosiveness. The get off at the snap, I think, is really impressive. Going back to what I watched from him, last summer in workouts and stuff like that. I've been just really high on how he sort of translates at from the offensive line, which he was playing at Skyline, to now the defensive line. I just really like his combination of size, athleticism, and potential. So I think Carson's going to be. I think he's going to have a pretty big role this year. And then I think the other freshmen coming in with Pupu Sepulona, Dylan Battle, and Semi Tawalunga. I think those are three guys that all could see time this year. I think there's a lot of optimism around this group, especially even more so for the future of the defensive tackle room. Optimism is quite high. I think Coach Whittingham put it that those are the stars of the defensive line, are the five freshmen that they brought in. And, as long as they continue to, take to the coaching, I think Luther Ellis, he doesn't have the notoriety yet in terms or the reputation, but I think there's a lot of people that have been around the program the last couple of years that have sung a lot of high praises for Coach Ellis and his ability to develop these defensive tackles. So really excited to see this young group develop over the course of time. Will they be ready to go game one? I think that's the big question mark that everybody's wondering. But I do think there's a lot of reasons to be pretty confident and optimistic in this group and in how it's going to look in 26 and 27 in those seasons. So, but yeah, I thought it was good to get to hear from Karson. I missed him during the spring ball, and got to talk to him on Thursday. So that was good to hear from him. Let's now get to my conversation with Brett Ciancia, the owner and publisher of Pick Six Previews, who's done a tremendous job. Obviously, over the last 7 years now, he's been doing the preseason preview magazine, and I think Utah fans are well aware of Brett and the work that he's done. But really good to have him on the podcast. So let's get to my conversation with Brett.
And Brett, man, I appreciate you hopping on. Thanks so much for joining me. It's good to talk to you again.
Yeah, great to be on, Steve. Thanks for the invite back. And it's that time of year again. It's preview magazine season. Everybody's undefeated. Everybody's optimistic. You got fall camp kicking off. But yeah, really excited to break down a wide open season here, 2025. We got the digital copies, the hard copies going out. So really exciting time here.
So we were talking a little bit off air before we hit record, but the first magazine edition was 2019, and I think Utah fans all remember that pretty fondly. And that, but I think you've been doing this for much longer. Just kind of give us, your background, your history coming up in with what you've been doing with the Pick Six Previews.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I launched Pick Six Previews in 2012 as a preview site. It was all done on the website there, previewing the back then Power Six conferences. That's how far it's come in 14 years. But yeah, it was online first for a few years, and then we went with the first magazine in 2019. But how I got started with it, it's really born out of a passion for college football. I mean, I'm based here in Eastern Pennsylvania. It's all pro sports talk. I couldn't find any college coverage. I'm not a Penn Stater, so I really had to find my own. And then I just set out to put together a product that I would like to read, all the information that I found relevant and informative to give the complete picture of each team. Plus, I'm a numbers guy. I factor those into the book too, and I try and make it. You can follow along pretty nicely there. So it's a balance of numbers and written text and positional previews. But then, yeah, the claim to fame is that over the last 10 years and last 5 years, the predictions have been graded number one most accurate in the country compared to my peers, the other magazines you see on newsstands. So, and I'll tell you what, Utah has a big role in that. And I jokingly call them Pick Six U, not only because of that long Pick Six streak that's still going on, 25 years worth, but because they've been huge in the growth of Pick Six Previews, the company. Because while everyone else was picking USC and UCLA out west, I've continued to go with Utah. I love their physicality, their player development, their culture, all those buzzwords, but you saw it every Saturday. So I think Utah fans are familiar with that, and it's been great being able to cover them a bit.
Yeah, let's talk about your projections and kind of your model and what you sort of value. It's been interesting, being a Utah fan and reading, your high praise of the program. Like you said, you've been on them, since 2019, and you've recognized that this is a program that's going to be very competitive. I would just be curious what goes into your evaluations and your models, and just kind of give us a peek behind the curtain in terms of how you put all this together.
Yeah, well, I'd say it's very exhaustive. It's very comprehensive, a holistic approach, whatever term you'd like to say. But it's really, I try and find everything. And first, it's the numbers. Like I said, numbers guy. I design formulas that work and are able to predict games and seasons and outcomes. So that's part of it. And in that, you have everything. You got the margin of victory, the yardage totals, some proprietary stats that I've built over the years that I think project games well. So you have your numbers angle, but it's way more than numbers. You can't just stop there. You need to really dig into the personal effect of it. I'm talking to head coaches, talking to coordinators. Been able to talk to Coach Morgan Scalley a bunch. He's one of my favorite defensive coordinators.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's the numbers, but then it's really watching games, spring games, practice clips, like the coverage that you're providing. It's so valuable for a national writer because we can't be on site everywhere. So yeah, I would say a balance between numbers, watching the games, the spring games, talking to coaches and beat writers, and then putting this thing together. And it has gotten way more complex with the transfer portal era, having to really
Yeah.
dig into who are all these guys, where are they coming from? Were they big recruits in high school? It's just very exhaustive. But that's, I think, some of the value I provide is that I do go there. I dig all the way in. I mean, there's no shortcuts. You're getting it all there presented on the page.
Yeah, I think that's going to be something that I'll ask about later on in the show is recruiting. And obviously with how it's evolved with the transfer portal, and you're seeing roster additions, significant roster changes, year over year. I'll pick your brains about all that sort of stuff as we get into it. But let's get into Utah and sort of their outlook for the 2025 season. Obviously, going back to last year, 5-7 year, and dealing with the injury bug they have, not just last year but even the year before, really put a damper on Utah's ability to contend last year. And obviously, losing 7 games straight, that was pretty tough for Utah, and something that we haven't seen. But as they've made changes, bringing in a new offensive coordinator with Jason Beck and his quarterback Devin Dampier, and have brought in a slew of other players, what in general is your outlook in terms of Utah and how they'll be able to bounce back in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. You can do all the research and the numbers you'd like, but the one thing you can't account for is injuries. And
Right.
unfortunately, that 2023, 2 years ago, that might have been the worst injury run I've ever seen. And
Yeah.
I know Coach Whittingham has had quotes like that. He called it the twilight zone. He couldn't believe what he was going through in 23. And then, you figure, all right, bounce back season for 24, Rising and Keith Deere back. You can't account for a guy getting thrown into the Gatorade bottles and jamming his hand. And then, the injury run again at quarterback happened. So,
Right.
it's so hard to look at that year objectively. I mean, it was all injury at quarterback. It broke the offense. So I see a bounce back. I think that Utah is too strong of a program. The track record is certainly there on defense. I know what we're going to have on that side of the ball. On
Yeah.
offense, yeah, you talked about it. You imported a whole new system. Jason Beck with his power rushing attack, #1 in the country rushing last year. But not just that, he brings his quarterback with him. Dampier, electric guy to watch, dual threat. I mean, whatever term you want to throw at him. What I liked was how elusive he is in the pocket. And I saw a stat about he was pressured 100 times last year, only sacked 4. That's the #1
Right.
sack rate in America. That might have been you tweeting that out too, by the way. Excellent coverage you have. But yeah, that alone stood out to me. That transition at quarterback and offensive coordinator. And he's going to be playing behind arguably the best line in the country. Definitely the best line in the Big
Yeah.
12, returning the entire 2 deep. So those are the areas that stood out. Why I'm calling for a bounce back. I've got him in the national top 25 and a player in this wide open Big 12.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting in your preview and that, and obviously recommend everybody that hasn't already purchased it to go purchase it and get a hard copy. Those are always fun to have along with you when you go to these games. A lot of fans go on road trips, and I think these are valuable tools as you get to these games, and
you start looking at some of the players at games, and having, a tool like the Pick Six previews, I think is really great to have. And so, with Utah specifically, I would be curious, how difficult is it to assess strengths and weaknesses of a team that has to turn over almost half of its roster?
Yeah, definitely. You like predictability, you like stability when you're
Yeah.
trying to forecast a team. And actually, for the most part of when I've been doing it, Utah has been that. It's been very stable. They don't lose their players to the transfer portal like other programs do, and they go through lengthy player development cycles. So this year does feel a little different. A lot of new faces on defense. Of course, you have your headliners there. You got Lander Barton
Hmm.
back at linebacker, and the defensive line with Logan Fano. And I like the secondary, although I keep hearing these guys are getting offensive snaps too. So, it's time for experimenting over at Camp Kyle.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, there's a lot more new faces than usual, especially the defensive line. A lot of new guys. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit of a question. And I think had this been a different program, I would have sold them more and, been more pessimistic. But I know what I'm going to get with the Scally defense. It's just been too long of a track record. So, it's next man up, and I think they're going to be okay. We might not know the stars right now in August, but I'm sure come December, they're going to be packing the All Big 12 team again.
Yeah, this is a team that, being around them, they definitely have that hunger. A lot of guys felt like they underperformed last year, and I think are definitely itching to get back on the field and, essentially, prove themselves again. So that'll be really interesting to see. And, we've already been talking about Jason Beck and Devin Dampier and them coming to Salt Lake City. And I would be curious to get your thoughts on Dampier specifically, and, his transition to the Big 12 and the increased competition that he's going to face in this conference coming from the Mountain West. How have you been able to get a better feel for, quarterbacks, transfers that move up a level and how they're able to perform? Obviously, whenever I talk about Dampier, there's typically a reference to Diego Pavia and his success at Vanderbilt, and you're starting to see other programs pursue those opportunities where you bring in an OC and quarterback package. I would just be curious, kind of your thoughts on his ability to adjust to this competition level and how you've seen that sort of influence, your projections and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think when you see a quarterback move up a level, there's examples in both directions of it working and not working. I mean, some of the
Yeah.
recent ones that have worked, look at the Heisman candidates last year. You had Shadur Sanders. He moved up from the FCS ranks, Jackson State, up to the Power Four and dazzled both years, but especially
Yeah.
last year. Cam Ward, another guy, he was originally, I think, incarnate word at the FCS
Yep.
level and gradually moved up Washington State, and then now was at Miami. So you see a lot of examples in both ways. Sometimes it doesn't pan out. Maybe the game does speed up too fast for the player. I'll say this, and the counter to the talk about, oh, it's a step up in competition. Well, I'll say he's going to have a stronger offensive line protecting him. Now he has a legit Power Four and arguably NFL. I mean, let's talk about it. He got first round
Yeah.
NFL projections. So while the speed of the game might increase, he might have more time in the pocket with a better line. He's going to get a second-year starter bonus. This is something I always talk about in the book, and everyone has witnessed this, where in a player's second season as a starter or a coordinator's second year at a program, it slows down for them. They gain a lot more efficiency. So looking at last year, a 12 touchdown, 12 pick, 1-to-1 is not a very good ratio, touchdown to pick, but you tend to see that improve in a guy's second season. So I'm optimistic. Yes, it's a tougher competition level, but he has better pieces around him, and he's now one more year experienced, and he's within the same system. So a lot to like from it, I think.
Yeah, I had a conversation earlier this summer and talking about Dampier and his adjustment to this level of competition. And, he talked about when you have a quarterback that's new in a situation, there's usually 3 or 4 buckets that go into, how that player acclimates, at that level. Obviously it's his talent level, it's chemistry with his receivers, it's knowledge of the playbook, and then it's obviously an understanding of the game and defenses that he's going to compete against. And then 2, obviously within that playbook is, the relationship with the offensive coordinator. And, Dampier coming to this level, obviously
doesn't have the chemistry with receivers, but he's got that command of the offense. And I think seeing that in spring ball is as clear as day, right? Seeing the difference in terms of his ability to execute the offense compared to the other guys that were learning the offense, I think it was really clear just how much of a difference that can make. And so, as we talk about Dampier and his game and we look at the numbers, where do you feel Dampier can make improvements, significant, minor, whatever sort of improvements, but where do you feel he can make a meaningful improvement?
Yeah, well, I would look at the passing stats. I mean,
Yeah.
like we said, 1-to-1 touchdown to pick. I think you're going to see an improvement here in a second season within this scheme, second year as a starter. So that'll help. And then when you look back and compare to last year's Utah stat profile, it was pretty poor there too in touchdown to pick ratio. So both Dampier himself and then the Utah offense, I think that's something to improve on. If you cut down on the picks, that's going to just drive everything else up. That's going to improve your QB rating, all the advanced stats for passing. It's going to keep drives alive. So taking care of the ball in the pass game is probably the most important thing for him. We know what he is as a runner and as a guy in the pocket. It's electric. I mean, stat I put in the book there, he had 520 rushing yards after contact alone. He went over 1,000 in total, but half of that was after contact. So even with an increase in competition, I think he's still going to be a dynamic athlete. And the worry I have, though, is if I have to poke a hole in this somewhere, I think it's at receiver, just the uncertainties. I mean, you look at last year's roster, 10 of the top 11 pass catches are gone. And you think, okay, well, maybe someone will emerge in spring. And it sounded like they did with Zacharias Williams. And you got to remember, I'm covering 68 of these teams. So, I saw that. I was like, okay, cool. They got their number one. That's great. Let's move on. And then a week later, I hear he's gone. So, so that's a question, is who's going to step up, and you might be seeing that now in fall camp taking form, but we'll see who steps up at receiver.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Zacharias Williams, had he not transferred, you feel, even slightly more optimistic about Utah and his presence. And obviously, he wasn't a guy that had big numbers, but emerging as a go-to receiver was significant. So that was certainly a blow. But I think we're getting some good updates from camp, and guys are making plays, and Tobias Merriweather, and others are certainly kind of putting themselves in that conversation to become that go-to guy for receiver. But I agree. I think there's some questions that won't be answered until we get into the season and see these guys perform. So I think that's definitely a fair assessment. And when we're zooming out and talking, conference race and that sort of stuff, this league is fascinating. Obviously, we know what happened last year. Arizona picked dead last. They win the whole thing. But I think we saw last year just how competitive this conference is from top to bottom. And I think that was really surprising. I shouldn't say surprising, but it really, that was emphasized last year to the nth degree with this league. So as you look at the Big 12, how many contenders do you think are in the league that have, a legitimate shot at getting to the Big 12 title game?
Yeah, we spoke a little off air beforehand, but this is the 14th year of Pick Six previews. I think this is the most wide open conference I've ever covered, predicted, projected. It's so wide open. Case in point is that Big 12 Media Days, they polled the coaches on, standings and all, and the coaches picked Kansas State, Iowa State as the championship game. I've got them 6th and 7th in the entire league. So outside my top 5, both of the teams they picked. So I would cut it there. I would say there's 7 contenders, and the 7 I'm referring to, I have Arizona State and Texas Tech facing off in the title game. I've got Baylor and Utah right there, 3-4. TCU as a team I'm really high on. I've got them in my top 25, and then the coaches picks Kansas State and Iowa State. So I see 7. You talk to some people, you could argue 8, 9, 10. It's so deep, but and you know what? That makes for a fun season, really. I mean, yeah, it might not have a Miami or a Clemson like the ACC has, but I don't judge a conference strength based off their number 1 or their number 2. It's like, how deep is this thing? And there are 8, 9, 10 legit top 40 teams. Maybe not a top 10, but a lot of top 40, top 25 caliber. And one thing here, not just because I'm on a Utah show, but I got to say, I love the fan passion in this conference. You turn on an ACC game, half of those stadiums are empty, and there's no media coverage, which is a reflection of a lack of a fan appetite. But The Big 12, man, you turn it on, these stadiums are rocking. You got Utah and BYU. When you watch these games, the camera literally shakes on TV when there's a big play. So I've come to really love this conference and can't wait to see it unfold. But that's where I've got it. I got Arizona State, your defending champs, with 20 starters back, even though they lose Cam Scatteraboo. I don't think last year was a fluke. I think it was pretty strong statistically. Texas Tech is a little bit of a wild card with that big transfer haul, all that oil money put to work. But I think it's undeniable the amount of talent that they just added to their roster. So that's who I ultimately went with for the title game.
Arizona State, Texas Tech. I'd be curious your thoughts, in talking in being at Big 12 Media Days and having the opportunity to talk to Kenny Dillingham, and as well as Joey McGuire and the Texas Tech representation there. It was really interesting because it was two different, coming to the same conclusion essentially of wanting to contend in the Big 12 title or in the Big 12 conference for the title. They're coming at it from different perspectives. Kenny Dillingham used retention and talked about retention a lot, whereas with Texas Tech, what we've seen with them is recruiting and funneling money to recruiting and bringing in this tremendous transfer haul. I would be curious your thoughts in terms of what do the numbers say? What do your models say in terms of, what is better? What is more valuable? And I'm sure there's a reason for both, but it was really interesting, hearing Dillingham talking about retention and Texas Tech obviously recruiting. Where does Pick Six previews fall in that debate?
Yeah, well, it might be the easy answer, but I like both, and I think it's really case specific. You'd love to have both, right? But I think it fits to each program. I mean, their styles. So Texas Tech, think of them. I mean, they have all that booster money, all that oil money, and they want to put it to use and really cash in on a big roster. So it sounds to me like more like the Ole Miss model, where it's a couple 1 or 2 year rental players, and they're very talented, but it's like just a big experiment. It's like throw all this money at it, bring them in, maybe it hits. With Arizona State, it looks like they want, and I know Dillingham talks about this. He calls it activate the valley, and that's the valley around Tempe, the local area. So he's more in the sense of building an in-state, like keep everybody in Arizona home. And I think with that, when players play nearby and in their hometowns and home states, you tend to see better retention. They're more likely to stay rather than jump all across the country if they've already started there. So it's two different approaches. Arizona State's is basically keep it local, keep it in state, and then you're going to hold on to players longer, develop them that's the old Utah model, really. Longer cycles. And Texas Tech just seems like, hey, you know what? We've tried to do it that way, and let's just throw a ton of money at it and see if it hits. And I think it might hit for both for their own reasons. And one thing with Texas Tech, also, I'll add this, and it's kind of interesting. Once you take Oklahoma and Texas out of this Big 12 footprint, we always think of them as Big 12, but take Texas and OU out of there. Really, the top recruiter now is Texas Tech and TCU over the last 5 years, last 3 years. That's where the big recruiting powers are now within this league. So they're just going to keep throwing the money at the talent acquisition game at Texas Tech.
So with that in mind, obviously talking about the top two contenders in Arizona State and Texas Tech, do you feel like the Big 12 has the sort of programs this season to – obviously everything centers around the college football playoff now and what's going to happen there. Do you feel like the Big 12 can get multiple bids this year based on what they have in the league this year?
It's definitely possible. And, I'll bring up 2023 Pac-12. I know we're going back a couple years, but for the longest time, I had to hear my fellow national writers and commentators always joke about how weak that Pac-12 was. I was a defender. I like to joke that I set the record for Pac-12 network hours in Pennsylvania. No one else here is up till 2 a.m. watching it except for me. But anyway, I love the conference. And what happened was they had their best year in a long time that season in the Pac-12. So if that had been a 12-team bracket in 2023, you could argue 3-4 teams would have made it from that league. So I think it fluctuates year to year. For the Big 12 to always be written off as the worst in the Power Four, I think it's a joke. First off, I'd throw the ACC in last place anyway. But I think what's key for the Big 12 is you got to win these early non-conference games. There's some opportunities out there. There's some W's to be had. Baylor-Auburn is a big one right away. I mean, if you can beat Auburn there in the opener, that you start to build the resumes up for the rest of the conference. How they handle SMU is big. Baylor and TCU both play SMU. That's a defending playoff team, a defending ACC runner-up. That's going to go a long way. And of course, you have Iowa State, Iowa. You can go down the list, but you want to clean up on these non-conference games and build your resumes, all because that means more 10-win teams in November, and that's what's going to get in.
Yeah, that's going to be key. A lot of marquee games, non-conference games this year for the conference, and that was something that Brett Yormark talked about at Big 12 Media Days, is taking care of business in the non-con. So that'll be certainly key. I'd be curious, just a couple more questions with you or for you, Brett. In your opinion, what are the most significant trends that you've seen in college football with how the game has sort of evolved, and which way is it trending? Just what have you seen as you've followed it as closely as you do, as sort of the trends that are shaping college football today?
Wow, that's a big question.
It's a
I
big
think,
question. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's true because it has changed a lot. I mean, think back to when I launched. It was 2012. It was the BCS era. You still had something called the Big East, and you had the
Yep.
Pac-10.
Yep.
It had the regionality and all the traditions involved. And I think we've gone away from that, unfortunately. I know that might have benefited some big TV networks, but I think when you destroy some regionality of it and break some tradition, you start to get away from what made college football unique. So I don't like how it's trending that direction. I would much rather keep it localized and regionalized. Utah is an example of that, and I do like
Yep.
where they landed, but you move away from some of that West Coast footprint. So yeah, it's just a changing game in terms of conference structure, playoff structure, how we acknowledge a national champion has shifted. And last year was an example where a team goes 10-2, Ohio State. They lose to their arch nemesis rival there on the final day, still make it back in the bracket, and then of course they go on to win it. Meanwhile, a team like Oregon went 13-0, beat them in the regular season. Most years in history, that would have been a national champion Oregon team, but then they had to, of course, redraw Ohio State and lost the rematch. So I think how we nominate and decide a national champion has changed. Player movement is just out of control. That's definitely different, and I
Yeah.
think that starts to hurt the. I've seen this talked about, but hurts the fans' access to a program. Usually, you get to know your players over
Yeah.
3, 4, 5 years, and that's how you identify with it. But it's with the magazine, fans are excited to read other teams, yes, but they're excited to read their own team in the magazine because so many new faces. It's just like you got to relearn your whole program every year. So I think that is changing, but still, I
Yeah.
mean, it's still college football. I don't want to be too negative. We love it. The stadiums remain packed. Saturdays in the fall are absolutely electric. So there's still a lot to love about the best sport in America.
Yeah, no, to your point, we had been doing a golf tournament, an NIL, based golf tournament here in Salt Lake City for University of Utah football players, and this is the first year I think in 3 years that we haven't done it, just because we didn't know a lot of the players, and
Yeah.
and
Yep.
so it's certainly changed. That has definitely been a change in the game. So, Brett, I'd be curious. Just we're talking about the playoff a little bit. How do you see this season unfolding, and who do you think are the top contenders in the college football playoff this year?
If you go conference by conference, I do think the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be your multiple bid leagues. I have the Big Ten getting 3, the SEC getting 4. So with those, I have a 3-team race in the Big Ten with Penn State, a very veteran squad and great coordinators, with Ohio State and Oregon also contending. And they're more transitional. They lose a lot of stars to the pros, but they have so many 5 stars stockpiled. So
Yeah.
Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon from the Big Ten. The SEC, I have getting 4. I have Texas and Alabama playing for the league title, with Georgia and LSU also claiming at-large bids. The ACC I saw as a 2-team race, and this one really drops off after your top 2. I've got
Mhm.
Clemson and Miami, and then nothing else in the top 25. So it's really a 2-team conference this year. Clemson obviously is coming off an ACC title themselves and has everybody back on the team. Miami replacing a lot, but recruits better. So those are the 2 there.
Yeah.
I do think Notre Dame steals a bid again. I think that with their schedule, they can go 10-2 and make it. 11-1's a lock, so I think they're going to be right back in there. Arizona State, I have emerging from a crowded Big 12.
Yeah.
So right now, I just see that there's so much parity at the top of this league that you're probably going to have a couple 10-2 or 9-3s at the top. So I think it'll just be the one bid. And then with the last spot, the non-AQ. Last year, I picked Boise State. I think Liberty was the odds-on favorite, but I trust the Mountain West as the best conference, so I went Boise, and they made me look smart. So I'm going to go Boise
Yep.
again to run it back. So that's the 12. It's a mix of your best recruiters, some of your most veteran teams, your best coaching staff. So, but yeah, it's wide open. A lot of other contenders from the Big 12 and the SEC could punch their tickets.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting with the Big 12. I think there's a big focus in, getting two teams in, getting multi bids, and that's going to be key for the Big 12. You want that. You want that representation, but certainly they're going to have to prove that two guys or two programs can emerge from this crowded conference. So, Brett, man, appreciate your time. I know you've got something special coming this season with your Pick Six Plus. Be curious just to kind of hear, where people can find that and what exactly all that entails and where they can find your work.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. A couple years in a row now. We'll keep it going. I love previewing the
Yep.
season with you and keeping up in the fall. But Pick Six Previews, the magazine, is on pick6previews.com. We have the digital copy. We have the hard copy. If you buy the hard copy, you also get the digital. That way, for the 3 days where it's being shipped, you have access right away to the magazine. So we have that on there, sample teams and testimonials on there. And then, yeah, Steve, you mentioned it there with Pick Six Plus. And what that is, of course, we have the magazine for the preseason, but once the season kicks off, I find that it's like drinking from a fire hose. You're trying to cover
Yeah.
60 games at once, all this new data dropping. I find I always have like 30 tabs open on my computer trying to look at all
Yep.
these games. But so what I put together here is it's all condensed onto one page per team. You have everything, all the advanced stats from my book, but then also the against the spread stuff, the betting stuff, all the trends and game logs, situational splits too. Like people like to see how's a team coming
Ooh,
off a
yeah.
bye, how are they as the road underdog, all those kind of splits, talent profiles, recent series history. So it's a lot of stuff, but go check it out there on pick6previews.com. We have, again, a sample of the plus package too. And if you sign up here in August, you also get what I call advanced rosters. And what that is, it's the advanced two deep of every team. It shows what they were recruited in high school, if they were transfers, were they all conference at their last stop, were they, blue chippers in high school. So it's a good visual representation. Like we said, a lot of player movement, but good to keep an eye on it that way. So yeah, thanks for referencing that. It's Pick Six
Yeah.
Plus.
Yeah, Brett, again, appreciate your time, man. You're always great. You've been a lot of fun to have on the podcast the last few years, and obviously your coverage has been top notch, and so you do a great job. And I know I
Thank
speak
you.
for a lot of Utah fans that appreciate all that you do. So, Brett, thanks for hopping on, man. We'll get you on sometime later this year, hopefully, and keep tabs on you.
Yeah, thanks a ton. I think I got to make my first trip out to Salt Lake City. Let's make it this fall. Let's see. But I've been dying to get out there. Maybe this year's the year.
Yes, please do, man. Please do. All right, we'll talk to you later, Brett. Thank you.
Thanks.